regardless of your HIV status. Be aware that AIDS science is 90% mindless repetition and 10% deeply inconsistent findings of no clinical value," unquote. From Professor David Rasnick, biochemist, and he holds 6 patents on the protease inhibitors, the drugs used in AIDS, and was initially a major proponent that HIV equals AIDS and equals death. Quote, "In 1990, at the San Francisco AIDS Conference, HIV co-discoverer Luc Montagnier announced that HIV did not, after all, kill T cells and could not be the cause of AIDS. Within hours of making this announcement, he was attacked by the very industry he helped to create. The HIV hypothesis of AIDS is the biggest scientific medical blunder of the 20th century. The evidence is overwhelming that HIV is not contagious, not sexually transmitted, or caused by HIV. The physicians who know or suspect the truth are embarrassed or afraid to admit that HIV tests are absurd and should be outlawed, and that the anti-HIV drugs are injuring and killing people. As a scientist who has studied AIDS for 20 years, I have determined that AIDS has little to do with science and is not even primarily a medical issue. AIDS is a sociological phenomenon held together by fear, creating a kind of medical McCarthyism that has transgressed and collapsed all the rules of science and has imposed a brew of belief in pseudoscience on a vulnerable public." And mind you, this was a mainstream scientist within the AIDS community whose very drugs were used by hundreds of thousands of people until he looked for the truth. This is from Dr. Donald W. Miller, medical doctor, Harvard University, Dartmouth, and professor, University of Washington School of Medicine. Quote, "AIDS is a government-defined disease. The CDC and the government-funded investigators accept as fact the supposition that AIDS is caused by HIV and is sexually transmitted. This is not to be questioned, but this HIV equals AIDS model does not jibe with the true facts of the matter. Only 1 in 1,000 unprotected sexual contacts transmits HIV, and only 1 in 275 U.S. citizens has antibodies to the virus. Consequently, the average uninfected person would need to have 275,000 random unprotected sexual contacts to acquire sexually transmitted HIV." And finally, just on the politics of this, we have Tony Brown, one of the most courageous and ethical journalists in the United States. He is also the founding dean of the School of Communication at Howard University, and he is coordinator of the historic Walk to Freedom March with Martin Luther King Jr., and of course he's the PBS show Tony Brown's Journal. Quote, "The greatest threat to life in the United States and the rest of the world is not the 30 diseases we call AIDS. It is the multi-billion-dollar AIDS industry composed of government, academic, medical, and industrial interests in the United States. I have concluded that AIDS is a scientifically dishonest construct, and as exemplified in the death of my friend Arthur Ashe, the lies that we have been told make it all the more deadly." On Dr. Robert Gallo, these are the views of individuals who have not been invited on public television, where that would be the most appropriate forum to challenge Dr. Gallo. Dr. Gallo deserves every opportunity to defend himself in any court of public opinion or any other jurisdiction. Therefore, allow Gallo and his detractors an opportunity to face each other and let the audience decide who is correct. Here is Dr. Joseph Sonnabend. He is a founder of the American Foundation for AIDS Research, AMFAR. Quote, "Gallo was certain, but the point is not to focus on Gallo. It's us, all of us in the scientific community. We let him get away with it. Nobody would say a word against Gallo. It had a lot to do with patriotism, the idea that this great discovery was made by an American." By Dr. Michael Lang, MD, head of AIDS program, St. Luke's Hospital. Quote, "I was very upset. The cause of AIDS was discovered by government fiat. I've been working with the Pasteur Institute for 6 months, but then the Gallo announcement was made at a press conference. As far as I'm concerned, from that point on, AIDS research turned into seedy criminal politics. and it remains that way. I was far from convinced by the data that they had then, and I'm still not convinced. We were all forced into a very dogmatic and simplistic view of what caused AIDS. Today, I think that even the greatest proponents of HIV no longer believe that it does all the damage to the immune system by itself. There have to be other factors involved, and because the HIV hypothesis, there has been little or no research done on what other factors may cause AIDS. We have Dr. Jens Gernald, MD, Doctor of Science, former professor of philosophy and principles, and he says the following: HIV is totally unrelated to disease or loss of immunity. AIDS is not an infectious disease. Robert Gallo and his HIV equals AIDS hypothesis club are unscientific quacks, as I've been alleging since 1988. Is AIDS an epidemic? Again, a strong and unconditional no. Of course, it is relatively easy to fake one. Opportunistic infections of diseases are always the real cause of death in people with weakened immunity. The statistics can be manipulated by lumping an ever-increasing number of these cases together under the heading of AIDS. HIV exists, so does AIDS, but the two are no way connected. Our definitive conclusions at this time: AIDS is the hoax of the century. Dr. William Godschlock, PhD biochemist, The Hague, formerly assistant professor, University of Virginia Medical School, and associate professor, University of Puerto Rico's Medical School, senior scientist at the Center for Energy and Environmental Research. Gallo had a press conference in 1984, declared that a new retrovirus, which he claimed to have discovered in a small number of AIDS patients, was the probable cause of AIDS. The new retrovirus was permanently named the human immunodeficiency virus. The word probable was soon forgotten, never to be admitted again. Margaret Heckler proclaimed, quote, "Today we add another miracle to the long honor roll of American medicine and science," unquote. The cause of AIDS has been established by government decree. The cause of AIDS has been established by government decree and not by independent scientific research and consensus. Incredible as it may sound to most, it is a fact that there is no proof whatsoever of HIV causing AIDS, in spite of the ever-present dogmatic pounding of all these years by the media and the phrase HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. Directly after the press conference, Gallo patented his method for testing against HIV antibodies, which has since made him a multimillionaire. As will be explained in the following, the test is not only grossly inadequate and totally unnecessary, but turns into an insidious death trap for those who happen to test positive. And a few more here. And this is one of the most respected scientists in the world. This is a man with hundreds of peer-reviewed papers. This is a man who has a reputation as a leading virologist and also one of the world's 5 leading experts on how to use the electron microscope, and he's done so thousands of times. Professor Emeritus, University of Toronto, Professor Emeritus